Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
USAPrepares.com, everybody. This is Rich Scheben from OffGridMontana.com, sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And what we are planning to do is stick up for the little guy. And I want to thank Nate from Minnesota for engineering the broadcast. We are going to stick up for the little guy that has no representation, no protection, and no restitution under the rule of law. And I hope to do some anti-politically correct rants as much as possible today. And as the program continues, I hope to get more politically incorrect as we go on. As usual, for those of you who listen to this program have heard me over the air for many years, you know I try to use financial, economic, social, and political rationale. I'm going to discuss the elite template for American destruction and what the elites and the so-called powers that be are using with their playbook and their blueprint flowchart for our destruction. And I hope to be redundant and at least repetitive on some important messages that I can say a certain way to help wake up the people. And I don't say that in a condescending way. I just know that a lot of Americans are very busy, working, trying to keep their head above water. For those of you who hear me, you know I like to use a lot of economic 101 statistics and data. And I'll just say that 43% of Americans can't afford basic rent or food. 69% have less than $1,000 of savings. And just a few years ago, when I was using this data, it was 60% of people had $1,000 in savings. And now it's up to 69%. Now, of course, 80% of us live paycheck to paycheck. So when I talk about ideas and solutions for the people, I talk about it in the context of trying to help the little people, which I define as the bottom 93% of income earners. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty, I have a short announcement to make about the Mike Ma training session. It has been postponed until Mike Ma returns from his travels in the Orient. And this is typed out to me from Vincent Finelli. And it says we needed a minimum of 10 participants for the training to be successful. We did not reach that number. It was not a matter of money. It was a matter of the number of participants. Maybe we can try another time. Thank you to our instructors who worked to make this seminar a possibility. Mike Ma, Joey from Michigan, Dan Setterfield, who offered free gunfight training to all attendees, and members of our class who offered to pay for others to attend. And as Dr. Richard Allen Miller said, it will all work out in the end, and if it has not worked out yet, it is not yet the end. So we all know that Dr. Richard Allen Miller is a great philosopher and has a lot of good things to say. So I have so much data, so much information to talk about, class. And regarding the Mike Ma announcement, I would like to, I've been to a lot of conservative meetings, a lot of Republican meetings, a lot of meetings for the benefit of the little people. And I can't tell you how often I go to these meetings and I hear oh, my husband didn't want me to come because he doesn't want to get us on the list or he's afraid of retribution. Well, I think it's past that, folks. I think the time for being afraid to being on a list it needs to be over. The silent majority needs to read up, research up, speak up, and vote up, because it's pretty obvious what's happening in America. And in fact, I'm just going to go through a couple of articles very quick. I'm just going to basically read the headline, which says it all. Okay, Stacey Abrams, basically who is running in Georgia, was caught on tape blatantly stating that the Democratic blue wave is based on illegal immigrants, voting for them. I can comment on this, but I don't think we really need a comment. Next article. Pelosi warns there will be collateral damage to those who disagree with us. Another article. Pelosi calls border wall immoral, while at the same time she's protecting her Napa Valley vineyard with one. If we listen to a lot of these so-called celebrities, politicians, they could be athletes, they could be singers, they could be actors, it doesn't matter. Most of them don't practice what they preach. And this is why I always talk about practice what you preach laws. I'll get into a little more specificity and detail later in the program about that. But we need to call for that, because all these people who are complaining about how the American people are bigots and racists and controversial extremists, intolerant, violent haters, homophobes, anti-everything, or an ism, ist, and phobia at the back of every word, they're not practicing what they preach. They all live behind some type of fence or wall. Here's another article. Texas Democrats caught mailing pre-filled voter registration to non-citizens. Let me read that again. Texas Democrats caught mailing pre-filled voter registrations to non-citizens. How come these people are not arrested? Why are these people not in jail? This is against the law. It's against the Bill of Rights. It's against the Constitution. It's against every state law. Here's another article. Federal judge shocked to find Obama State Department lied to protect Hillary from email server lawsuits. Imagine my shock. You mean it's illegal to be split and destroy evidence with a hammer? Or to sell our uranium to the Russians? Or sell our information to the Chinese? No! Somebody stop me. And speaking of immigration, I pulled this off of, this is regarding Fox News today. About 80% of migrant caravan are men under the age of 35. And for those of you who think that the older people are so wealthy compared to the millennials, here's an article that says 90% of all Americans over 50 will file for bankruptcy before they're 70 years old. What I'm going to go into right now, folks, I'm going to do a little Economic 101, and then I am going to really get into this elite template, this flow chart, and really show how the aristocracy has been emboldened by to a divide and conquer strategy, and how we can do something about it. And before the end of the show, I'm going to talk a lot about ideas and solutions for the little guy, for the Americans. For example, we need to get rid of electronic voting. We need to have paper and receipts and stubs. And we need to count the votes on video and have verification of citizenship. If Trump did this in executive order fashion, I think it would really make a big difference regarding the authenticity and validity of our voting process. But I want to talk a little bit about our economy. I've made it, for those of you who heard me discuss this over the years, especially the last two. I've made it very clear that Trump has inherited a disaster. He inherited sabotage. He inherited demolition, because every book is cooked. The inequality is between the haves and have-nots is an all-time high. And basically it's a war against the middle class. It's to keep the status quo, and I call that an incognito caste system. And I wish most people would not think it's all left-right paradigm. It's a lot less left-right paradigm as it is the aristocracy controlling the serfs. Now, when you look at demographics, debt, credit, or debt, global debt, corporate debt, household debt, credit's collapsing. I go on MarketWatch.com often and look at the spreads between the 2 and the 10 and the 30-year yield, and it's less than 20 basis points. And I know this audience on GCN and RBN is aware of what basis points are, but just in case there's somebody who is a new listener, basis points, one interest rate point is 100 basis points. So to think of the fact that if you bought a treasury bond and it yields roughly in the neighborhood of 20 basis points between 10 years and 30 years, you're only getting 20 basis points advantage for them to hold your money for an extra 20 years, which is absolutely ridiculous. The game is absolutely totally rigged with a lot of government promises, global debt, corporate debt. Again, all of it is absolutely unsustainable. And this is why the elite want universal basic income, because they've basically given themselves universal basic income from the little people for the last 20 years. And of course, you've heard me blame demographics. And I say demographics because of the fact that when you look at demographics, what is the largest group of growth through 2050, from now to 2050? It's going to be the old people. It's going to be the baby boomers. So as more people retire, and especially if 90% of the baby boomers are going to be filing for bankruptcy, obviously they're going to be pulling what little money they have out of the stock market. And most Americans don't have money in the stock market. 1% of the people own 83% of the stock market. 10% own 96%. So I'm going to talk in more detail and specificity about Economics 101. Then I'm going to share with you what has happened with group identity politics and how this has lowered the bars of standards and expectations, not just for getting a job, but has destroyed our nation regarding culture, traditions, and history. Hang on, folks. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. Welcome to USAPrepares.com. Rich Scheben from OffGridMontana.com sitting in for Vince today. Now, when I went through some of those articles a few moments ago before the break, it's pretty obvious that the so-called blue wave has thrown admissions from several people that they don't care about civility. They don't care about cheating. They don't care about lying. They don't care about having illegal immigrants break the law and literally vote. This is desperation, folks. When you get into a position that you can't use your big boy and big girl words anymore, when you can't compete in the arena of idea solutions, when you tell people who are often bought and paid for through certain groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and they're literally paid at the highest levels, and you're telling them to scream, to grunt, to chant, and even to do violence, you know that they can't compete in those arenas of ideas and solutions, and that's a desperate move. Now, when you look at all the things I have talked about over the years, whether they be financial, economic, social, political, whether I be chewing up and spitting out political correctness, it's pretty obvious that if you've read even excerpts from Marx, Alinsky, Cloward Piven, the Communist Manifesto, the Frankfurt School, you will see that the American people and the plan was to use group identity politics and make them drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness. for the purpose of these politically correct buzzwords like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, inclusiveness, prosperity, humanity, democracy, accountability, all words that have basically been hijacked by definition to use as tools to divide the American people by groups. And what this has done is set the stage for government interventions, confiscation, redistribution of wealth, and they use certain words, professional wordsmithing, Hegelian dialectic, media propaganda, subliminal messaging, to coerce people to think that they're doing it for the benefit of humanitarians or sustainable cities or global warming and climate change. Basically what it's all done for, is to lose individual rights. You know, they try to pass this narrative that, it's for the good of the people, the good of the group, the good of mankind. And all they're doing is trying to eliminate our free speech and our ability to control our own destiny. So we are in a situation that the game is rigged, and the little guy is all about trying to speculate or hedge for the purpose of solvency and liquidity, because that's all he has left. And we are in a stagflationary, deflationary spiral. However, with Keynesian economics, corrupt monetary policies in the central banks, and group identity politics, which I talk about often and I will again today, you'll see that it's getting very, very difficult for the bottom 93% of income earners to control their own destiny. And freedom, liberty, time, health is getting trampled on. Anything to do with the middle class is we're losing our ability to govern ourselves, especially when you look at, what's happening with follow the money, the printing of money. For example, QE, 95% of that money goes to the top 1% to 7%. Great majority goes to the top 1% to 2%. Look where the subsidies goes. Why is health care up 880% for inflation? How about the special interest in the lobbying and the PACs? How can the small and medium-sized business compete with the corruption, the manipulation, the deception, the technocracy? And then they get replaced with robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence. And that's one of the reasons I talk ideas and solutions often. For those of you who've been hearing me for a long time, you know I live off the grid, make my own electricity, live in a log cabin with no interior pipes, no hot water heater, no pressure tank. We're going to talk a lot of ideas and solutions after I'm done with Economic 101. Hold on, folks. For arenas, but it's all fun. It's all great. The animals are super. Everybody has a role on the farm. The dogs guard. The chickens have a role. The goats have a role. Everybody has a role, and it really is a pleasure to watch, especially in the spring when there's babies running everywhere. But I want to talk a second about Keynesian economics, because you always hear me talking about blaming the rigging of the game with the demographics, central bank corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, group identity politics. And I do occasionally get specific with detail, but I just want to remind people what Keynesian economics really is. It really leads to government demands of austerity. It's not about free markets. It's not about supply and demand. And austerity really is confiscation. It creates an illusion of wealth. When you really look at the money supply, it's grown like 20 times versus the working population, which has grown less than one time. So the result is a disassociation of dollars or money creation from population growth to substitute a flood of manufactured liquidity for waning demand. And this forces prices higher despite decelerating growth and demand. So it's kind of a smoke and mirrors situation. And the connection between inflation and centralized top-down control from the state is basically to create special privileges for certain people at the top and certain groups for, at the bottom 93%, so we can be divided. So when you look at Keynesian economics, it's kind of central bank, top-down, no accountability, elite control, corruption and manipulation that has created this incognito caste system, which is my term for the status quo. You know, they say deficits don't matter. They believe money can increase the economy by increasing the supply, by changing the supply. That's not how supply and demand and free markets work. They believe that government spends a lot and the private sector becomes broke, and GDP is everything, and GDP does not... I talk about units of measure all the time and calculations and how things have changed. GDP is not equivalent to happiness, okay? It never has been. It absolutely is not. Because when you look at gross domestic product, you got to look at the fact that it takes somewhere between $3 and $6. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.50 right now to create that much debt for $1 of GDP growth. So how can there be validity or credibility with a unit of measure like that? And if you had to define Keynesian economics in two words to make it real simple, I would call it elite interventionism. You can't print and inflate and buy now and pay later. And Keynesian teachings even allow for government to shift asset and liability columns. So when you hear things like creative accounting, manipulation, goods and services not increasing, and increasing prosperity is basically for the top 7%. Now, Austrian economics isn't perfect, but it's a little more middle-class friendly, gold friendly. It's better for freedom and liberty, and certainly better for free market and supply and demand. But I think we're past the point of fixing a broken system like this. And, I talked about QE, quantitative easing, on how 95% of that money goes to the top 1 to 7%. The great majority of that goes to the top 1 to 2%. Well, that's what's been happening over the past 10 years. When Paulson, so-called borrowed $4 trillion to so-called save the banks and the too big to fails and too big to jails, they didn't fix the problem. They didn't pay things off. They just added to the debt. They added to the derivatives, which is $1.5 quadrillion. Nothing was helped. All it did was feather the pockets of the elite. And I talk about this in detail because it's so important to show how fake and phony the whole system is, especially the stock market. When Trump was a candidate, he talked adamantly about the bubbles and the corruption and how everything is fake and phony. But he's using the same measures that Obama did. So I want you to think about that. And not to mention, I'd also mention the fact that Obama had zero ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. So people were borrowing free money. Well, now, look at what the Fed's doing. They're increasing at least 25 basis points almost every period when they are looking at voting on increasing or decreasing rates. So what ZIRP has done over the past 10 years, and then President Trump had that tax benefit, and it really helped the billionaires as well, dramatically. I have to say this. Trump's doing a lot of good things, but he's done some things that hasn't really helped the little guy either. And I think what we need to do is hold everybody's feet to the fire. Because what stock buybacks have done is, first of all, when the money was available to come back to the States that was abroad for all these years, instead of putting the money towards expansion of new products and services and employees, and in fact paying off the corporate debt, what they did was they bought stocks. And then they bought more stocks by issuing more debt, a.k.a. bonds. So now they sell the bonds to desperate pension funds whose desperately seeking yield. So when they keep buying your shares, basically you end up in a situation where you have less outstanding shares. And then the dividends, even though I've mentioned many, many, many companies that aren't even making cash flow, that are zombie companies, that are not making profits, but they're paying high dividend yields to their preferred primary shareholders. Again, feather in the nest of the super wealthy. So when more buybacks occur with share buybacks, buying stock, the executives, the CEOs, the CFOs, especially the CEOs, they cash in their stock options. So again, they've left their core business model. They're creating more debt, and they're selling debt to unsuspecting people who are seeking yields, who are desperate. So they're pocketing executive cash, and then with some of that money, they do more acquisitions and mergers. And we all know that goes towards consolidation. And then who takes the place of the people? Robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, and the technocracy. So we're in a situation where we have a lot of high-yield junk bonds and won't be able to pay back investors. When all this crashes, it's going to be a major default. Not to mention the fact that margin debt is an all-time high. And this is going to force sales of assets or collateral, and this is going to trigger a huge collapse. So when you have less new products, you have more money chasing less goods. So that's manufacturing inflation. So I'm going to talk about this elite template. I try to discuss this as often as I can because this is really a flow chart for destruction of the American people, especially regarding the little guy. The powers that be are doing everything in their power to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people by every group imaginable. This is why there's race baiting, gender baiting, sex baiting, sexual orientation baiting, ideology baiting. They're even creating generations going at each other's throat. This is all by design. And this is not new. It's a little more sophisticated than it was during the Roman Empire, but this has been going on by the elites for thousands of years. Divide and conquer. Everything I'm about to discuss, and most things I do discuss, is a subset under political correctness. Okay? Because political correctness, too many people think it's telling a joke in the wrong place, or it's affirmative action or quotas. It's way more than that. There's 1,000 subsets under political correctness, and I'm being gracious with that number. So when you look at what the powers that be are doing, and they use the mainstream media, they use the lawyers, the judges, the bankers, the politicians as liaisons to manage the people, to control the people. Their job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, ideology. Now, there's only about 5, maybe 6 companies that own everything: TV, radio, newspapers, production companies, publishing companies. Now, this particular program, USAPrepares.com, is on GCN.com and Republic Broadcasting Network as well. And we hope that we are able to maybe wake some people up, maybe piss some people off. But what we're trying to do is make the silent majority realize that they are needed for our freedoms, liberties, and pursuit of happiness, because we do not have justice. And we owe it to our fallen American heroes, where we've lost over 1 million American combat soldiers for our freedoms and liberties. A lot of these have gone to war, like Vietnam, under the false flags. They are talking. We need to thank these people. We need to stick up for these people. And we need to stick up for Americans. Thanks for holding on, folks. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to USAPrepares.com. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And I was talking about the elite template for the destruction of America and how they want to sway public opinion by always holding on to the narrative, the memes, the themes, the talking points. You know, these are the same people that demand that we have the same rules, laws, and accountability, but don't have the same rules, laws, and accountability, and based it on a tiered basis depending on what group you're in, which has nothing to do with merit or earning it or appreciation or value. And we can see that dramatically. This is the same people that demand to have the bars of standards and expectations lowered for getting a job based on group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status. As you remember, I mentioned some of those statistics that you could have mentally put on a graph earlier in the show, where 69% of Americans don't have $1,000 in savings. Well, as you can see, this isn't based on prosperity. They say it is. They say inclusiveness, equity, equality, fairness, prosperity, all this stuff. These are just words that, again, they've hijacked from definition to use as political tools to divide the American people. These are the same people who say there's no biological difference between a man and a woman. And now men are identifying as women, winning bike races and basically pummeling women in many, many sports. This is the same people that demand that we should have 51 genders, like de Blasio, mayor of New York City. These are the same people who say that we should protect females, and then they viciously attack Brett Kavanaugh's 10-year-old little girl. These are the same people who demand that we should swipe under the rug all the pedophile stories and the Democrats assaulting women and children that don't exist as long as they're from the Democrat Party. These are the same people who are teaching 6-year-old kids how to give BJs and choose their gender identity in public schools behind parents' backs. These are the same people who's a proponent of everyone in the world having as much sex as they want as long as they're not heterosexual. You know, when you hear all these terms, and you've heard me say this many times before, the contradiction in terms, when people say hypocrisy, double standards, it means nothing. You can say it, but if you just say it and stop there, nothing gets stopped. This is why we need practice what you preach laws. Now, there's so many people who are on the so-called left. We can't call Democrats liberal because they're not. When they are trying to, admitting, not trying, they're admitting to the abandonment of free speech and civility. We need to get rid of that word liberal, because liberal is supposed to be more tolerant in the context of helping people. You don't fight inequality by giving people money that hasn't been earned or people didn't put money into the kitty. I use Social Security as a great example. If you put money into the kitty, you take out of the kitty. What if we had a solution where the people said, let's have an executive order where voter tampering would be confiscation of wealth? I believe he did something like that. But what if we expanded it and saying that all individual corporations and NGOs who have been basically paying for treason, sedition, espionage, bought and paid for. And you know how I define bought and paid for. Basically, it means that you sold out the little guy. That includes hiring of protesters for violence and destruction of property. Confiscate the wealth of all these people who are doing that. I'm certainly a proponent of free speech, but when chanting violence, destruction of property, intimidation, threats, basically is their only hope, that means they've lost the game. It's over. And we need to create new solutions for the people. Hold on, folks. We'll be back after the heartbreak. Thank you. Maybe your country a better place, maybe so you can share what you've learned, maybe so you can be a mentor to proteges. Well, if we don't have free speech, how are we going to make anything better? How are you going to control your own destiny? How are you going to make it a living? It's just something to think about. And when we allow the elite, the establishment, whatever you want to call them, to sway public opinion and hold on to the narrative by all means necessary, especially with group identity politics. And they say we need to divide and conquer. Again, the subset under political correctness. We need to stand for principle at this point. And I have 3 criteria that I try to mention every show that I'm on. And that is, first, the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second is truth. This isn't a Hollywood movie where only 2% has to be based on truth. When I mean truth, I mean you have to use objective facts in lieu of subjective emotional opinion. And you have to do it to your best ability. But you have to have the guts to be willing to be hated for saying the truth versus wanting to be liked by blowing smoke up people's ass and telling certain people, certain groups, what they want to hear. And third, if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, then you get to do it too. In other words, if they do it, you do it. The simple version. So when they use group identity politics, which has been their home run pitch for a long time now, for years, and they use media propaganda, professional wordsmithing, etc., Hegelian dialectic, and I think most of this audience knows that Hegel was a 19th century German philosopher who was basically labeled as an imperial con artist. So when we lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job, we don't breed synergy. The elite basically foment hate and destruction, chaos and infighting, because we're degrading all these people and disrespecting them because we're saying, or the elite are saying, that you can't compete, that your job is, you're suboptimal, your work. They're insulting your work ethic, your ability, and their intelligence by saying we need to lower the bars of standards and expectations for this job. Well, never in history, ever, I'm using a term of absolutism, do you empower a nation, a group, or an individual by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job. Ever. So, why are they doing this? They're not doing it for equality, fairness, tolerance, accountability, prosperity, inclusiveness. Well, maybe inclusiveness because everybody's getting poor at the same pace. Definitely not for humanity or democracy. They're doing this so they can make the populace submissive. They want to break your will. They want to be able to call you names like racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorist, all these words that you've heard me say even earlier in the show and throughout the years. Again, they're buzzwords, all hijacked by definition to make the people submissive, to break your will. And that's why they demonize, discredit, and delegitimize anybody who shines light on this. That's why they use the mainstream media to use satire and banter for late-night shows. And that's why all the fake news are bought and paid for. All the mediums in the mainstream media are bought and paid for. All the talking heads. Not for the purpose of, again, fairness, equality, prosperity. That's why I use data and statistics and show the numbers so you can, in your mind, put it on a graph that shows how the bottom 93% is losing ground. The middle class is losing ground, big time. So when you lower the bars of standards and expectations, not only do you destroy America from within, not only do you reward mediocrity, not only do you turn your country into the law of diminishing returns, but words like opportunity, knowledge, ingenuity, productivity, innovation has left the building for the little guy. It's over. And this is why we need to stick together as a people, which has nothing to do with the groups that the elite want to put us in by skin pigmentation shade or gender or sexual orientation or ideology or generation. Because their job is to make sure that they create chaos and infighting. And that's how a divide and conquer strategy works. Now, I want to share some examples of how lowering the bars of standards and expectations on the job has metastasized like a cancer to the American culture, traditions, and heritage. Not in any particular order, just some notes that I wrote down. Look at the bought and paid for media. Look what Facebook. They've literally been caught protecting child porn scandals. They say they keep hunt, kill all whites. They say they declare it's not hate speech, while Zuckerberg, who happens to be white, calls everybody dumb effers. But none of the people on the left, because they're getting funded by these rich people, especially in big tech and the big corporate oligarchies, they don't call the Zuckerbergs or the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or the Zuckers or the Gates or the Buffetts. They don't call them names because they get a lot of money from these people. Well, if you're going to say all whites are bad, why don't you say all whites are bad and name these people and have the guts to do it? But they don't. And how about the Huffington Post defending articles where authors don't exist? The word to, T-O-O, they say is sexist. So you remember, folks, all messages have to be sanctioned. That means they have to be approved from the elites. It's up to us, the people, to hold the narrative. CNN said the term hard worker is racist. Well, if hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications no longer matter for a job, and it's only based on what group you're in, how do you control your own destiny? How do you separate yourself from the masses? Why go to college and come out of debt and miss out on time, leverage, and on establishing equity, like a home, and be forced to rent? Why do it? Why listen to this program? Why communicate and speak? Think about that. The mainstream media in general, they put out thousands of hoax sites with completely fake news, misleading information, and 50 versions of the same story. How many times you go from one station to the other, and they're saying the same thing, the same narrative? Don't you think they're owned by the same people, especially when only 5 or 6 companies own everything? How about GMOs, hormones, steroids, and antibiotics in our foods? How about the vaccine situation? How about wars, geoengineering, pedophilia, fluoride and chlorine, plus 200 other chemicals in our water? You don't think this has been a lowering the bars of standards and expectations? Now, when the mainstream media says stuff, I don't think anybody believes them. Last poll I read, it was like 6% or 9% believability. It's kind of like going into a grocery store. They say a few things that's true, and the rest is propaganda to make people think a certain way. But just think about it. They hope we have short memories. Look at Twitter and Facebook and the censorship and propaganda they're doing, run by China. That includes Google and Apple, who are positioned in China. Is that treason? Is that espionage? Is that sedition? You be the judge. How about ABC News? Remember when Brian Ross sent markets spiraling down in a false report? How about CNN falsely reporting candidate Trump had access to hacked documents from WikiLeaks? How about when Time falsely reported that President Trump removed the bust of Martin Luther King from the Oval Office? Do you remember when CNN falsely edited video to appear that President Trump overfed fish with the Japanese Prime Minister? Or how about the time when CNN falsely reported that Anthony Scaramucci, the meeting with the Russian, and 3 CNN employees resigned over a fake story? How about Newsweek falsely reporting that the Polish First Lady did not shake President Trump's hand? And the next day there was proof on the new media, what they like to call the alternative media. How about CNN lying to President Trump or about President Trump and the FBI James Comey story? You know, the list is so long, it speaks for itself. Now, I do talk about illegals and immigration because people are missing out on the facts. I mentioned earlier in the show how the illegals, dead people are voting, multiple people are voting across state lines, but yet you hear all this Russia election interference. But the Democrats don't want voter ID laws. See, this goes back to hypocrisy, double standards, and why we need practice what you preach laws. Now, I have nothing against anybody who comes from a different country. My mom came from the Ukraine portion of Russia. So she came here legally. But this whole theme, this whole narrative about immigration is to foment hate, to create race wars. Again, divide and conquer strategy. But I'm going to share some facts with you. There's no one I know that's anti-immigration. All people are saying, including President Trump, is that they need to be vetted. What's wrong with vetting somebody? When you get a job, hopefully they hire you for your qualifications. At least they used to in America. Now it's by what group you come from. But why can't we use vetting? Anybody with common sense and logic is saying this. I'll talk more in detail after the break, folks. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And as usual, I am definitely not going to get to all the talking points that I wanted to discuss today, which I never do. But I'm going to give it my best shot, and I'm going to keep rolling here to hopefully give you as much information as possible, because I feel obligated to do that while on the air and not do small talk. I feel it's absolutely necessary to talk about things that are outside the box and that the mainstream media does not want you to know. So that being said, I was talking about immigration, and I'm talking about, for those of you who might have just tuned in, I'm talking about how when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job, how this is metastasized like a cancer into all aspects of American culture, traditions, and heritage. So I'm going to keep talking about it, and I kind of delved into immigration. I want to talk about some objective facts here. Again, I don't know anybody who's illegal, who is anti-immigration as long as it's legal. My mom was one of them. But people need to know some of the facts, because this is all meant, the discussion of it, to foment hate, to create race wars, to divide the American people. And I want you to think, when I go through some of these objective facts, how this affects the poor and middle class. And I think I made it very clear when I was talking about Nancy Pelosi and a lot of these elite people, whether they be athletes, politicians, bankers, actresses, actors, any type of celebrity. They're usually living behind walls or fences or have armed security guards. So we can't allow these, again, double standards and hypocrisies to go unmentioned, and this is why we need to have practice what you preach laws. But we have over 900,000 convicted illegal felons roaming the streets right now. Over 4,300 Americans killed by illegal alien criminals every year. Who gets killed? The same people who fight our wars. The poor and the middle class, the bottom 93%. We have much more crimes committed against the poor and middle class than the super wealthy. How about your car insurance bill, your public education bill, your health care bill? And the cost shifting occurs because illegal immigrants can literally walk into an ER and get care where you can't, because your bill is going to be astronomical. And I want you to listen to this quote, America. And I know a lot of the Western world listens to this as well. But here's the quote, and I quote, "We are sending a clear message. Just because your child gets across the border, that doesn't mean the child gets to stay. Hillary Clinton said that. Hillary Clinton. See, they want us to be dumbed down. Again, distracted, dumbed down, and divided by groups. They want us to have no memories. Well, I write a lot of this stuff down, and I still call myself, for those of you who've heard me over the years, I call myself an ordinary, average Joe, non-hyphenated American. And I do that because it's true. So as we surrender our jobs, especially to robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, which is going to take away millions of jobs, the Congressional Budget Office says 1 in 5 illegal aliens will go on food stamps if Congress approves programs like DACA amnesty. Non-citizens, federal government facts, account for 22%, more than 1/5 of all federal murder convictions, 18% of fraud, 33% of money laundering, 29% of drug trafficking, and 72% of convictions for drug possession paid for by the American taxpayer. This is federal government statistics. So you have to believe these statistics have already been skewed. Because you know what statistics mean. Most books are cooked today for the benefit of the elite. And these are federal government facts. Basically, the American people are broke. 80% are living paycheck to paycheck. This has nothing to do with skin pigmentation, sexual orientation, religion, nothing. It's a fact that we are unable to take in people who are unvetted with no skill set. That's the bottom line. And hopefully these facts prove that point. We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back, folks, to USAPrepares.com. This is Rich Scheben from OffGridMontana.com, sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And what we're talking about is, at this point in time, is when you lower the bars and standards and expectations for a job based on what group you're in, what has happened with ignorance, apathy, and indifference for every part of American life. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to use objective facts. I'm trying to use government statistics. And I want you to interpret what I'm saying, not for the fact of dividing the people, but to wake the people up. You know, when I talked about earlier how the same people who wanted to be basically a proponent of everybody in the world having as much sex as they want, as long as it's not heterosexual sex. Well, I'll guarantee you, I've had this conversation with many, many people, whether I've given a talk or a radio show, in a green room, and in a restaurant. 99% of the people feel the same way. They don't really care if you're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, transsexual. What most people really care about is you go behind closed doors, you close the door, you do your thing, and you don't have to talk about it, and especially you don't have to ask for some type of victim group status and lower the bars and standards and expectations for a job versus protectionist group status. And this is what we're talking about, how this is metastasized like a cancer throughout society. Nobody really cares what you do, as long as you don't shove it down people's throats. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. Please don't take it that way. I mean it as people care about adult mutual consensual sex. That's it. Mutual consensual sex. No pedophilia. Mutual consensual sex. It's quite simple. It's not rocket science. So I'm going to go back to some of the things I have on my list regarding how this has lowered the bars of standards and expectations in America. How about free health care? Pick your own doctor. Remember that? Remember Hillary and Brian Williams getting shot at in helicopters? See, when you transition to a society where the emperor has no clothes and people are afraid to speak up, we embolden the ruling class where they can say anything and do anything without fear of rule of law. How about, Trump is such a racist that Jesse Jackson gave him an award for helping minorities with the lowest black Hispanic unemployment ever. And Obama doubled black unemployment for the purpose of creating more division, hate, and divide and conquer strategy. Google, Twitter, Facebook, censoring, surveillance. We're truly living in a 1984 Twilight Zone episodes. How about no savings? This is for the bottom 93% as well. More debt, less credit. I've talked about the yield curve in many, many, many different episodes with lots of specificity. I mentioned it briefly today. Less freedom, more bureaucracy, more violence, more brainwashing, more militarized fascists, lawlessness, corruption, untrustworthy, basically divisive warmongers holding the microphones. We have no burden of proof. It all depends on what group you're in. So the powers that be are creating the problems as well as the reactions and the solutions. Due process. As people who are wondering if we even have due process anymore. Detaining people indefinitely. No citizen rights for the little guy. No restitution of the law, mass surveillance and censorship, secret wars, secret societies, secret courts, pedophilia running rampant, no accountability for elite groups, for elite individuals. Power corrupts. I cannot mention practice what you preach laws enough. How can a self-serving Congress represent the people, 93% of the people, when they voted full pensions after one term for themselves? With overuse of eminent domain, let's talk to the Bundys and the Hammonds about that. Giving away billions of dollars for personal gain and campaign contribution. Lobbyists, special interests, PACs, government grants. This supersedes all free markets and supply and demand. Pork barrel spending, police state militarized, FBI, CIA, NSA, all of our intelligence agencies, which has been in the news a lot lately, being owned by the highest bidder. How about antitrust monopolies of the too big to fail and too big to jail corporate America, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, all the mainstream media, all owned, influenced by China and elite narratives to distract them down and divide the American people and feather their own nest. How about 3 times the leverage of stock market risk compared to 2009 with the highest margin debt ever? No problem there. So the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the rule of law is under assault. Sanctuary cities, gun-free zones, highest murder rates in gun-free zones. 98% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. These are statistics, folks. I'm not making this up. I'm just jarring memories here, especially with an election coming down the pike. Wages down, money velocity down, savings down. Transgender males competing in girls' sports. Games like tag and dodgeball being banned because it's too physical or dangerous. Participation trophies. Condoleezza Rice worried that women are turning into snowflakes and infants with marches and Me Too movements, and that men no longer want to be around them. An Oakland mayor helping illegals convicted of sex crimes in evading ICE. Again, adult mutual consensual sex. How about things that are racist? Bulletproof glass, trees on a golf course, yoga, Disney movies. I'm not making this up. People, these are things that I have gleaned over the last few years of what the mainstream media has called racist. It should be a satirical portion of this show, really. Calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas, but you can call Ivanka the C word. don't have enough lactose intolerant, and it's racist. Science, because black magic can't be explained by students in South Africa. Math is racist. Camouflage is racist. Lucky Charms cereal is racist. Here's one of my personal favorites. Expecting people to show up on time for commerce. How the hell can you run a business if you can hire somebody who's a hyphenated American because they can't show up on time? And saying you're not racist is racist. We have actually dialed down into stupid. And for those of you who believe in the American dream, goals, controlling your own destiny, living a life interrupted, being happy, for those of you who think that being a hyphenated American, you should vote a certain way, there's nothing more insulting and degrading to your ability and your work ethic than saying you need to vote a certain way. Please listen to Dr. Ben Carson, Candace Owens, Justice Thomas, Diamond and Silk, Brandon Tatum, Alveda King. I think we all remember that Margaret Singer, who was a Democrat, is in video, audio, and transcript used Planned Parenthood to control the black population. I'm sure we all remember that Obama doubled black unemployment. You know, we have to go back to reality. We have to use objective facts. We have to remember that the Republican Party was the party that freed the slaves. The Democrats voted against it. The KKK was basically instituted by the Democrat Party. Hillary Clinton's mentor, Senator Byrd, was in the hierarchy of the KKK. We have to go back and read history. How about Loretta Lynch? Remember Obama DOJ met with Bill Clinton on the tarmac? She said, quote, "We need more marches, blood, and death on the streets." Now, if that's not an admission to a divide and conquer strategy, I don't know what is. First graders taught gender, sexual identity, and how to choose which sexual stuff to do in public government schools. How about the number one cause of death under 50 is drug overdose? You think we're increasing our standards here, folks? How about bathroom scales being taken out of school locker rooms? Because it makes certain people feel sad. Doesn't lower the bars of standards and expectations, just makes them feel sad, so let's take the bathroom scales out. How about killing babies and selling baby parts to the highest bidder with no jails, and when the journalists film it, they get arrested and get fined? How about former UN advisors defending female genital mutilation? How about the DNC, the Democrat National Committee, paying $12 million to former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele? This came from hero ex-CIA Kevin Shipp, in order to gather info from second and third party sources, which turned out to be so-called Russian intelligence. And this information was leaked to John Brennan to get FISA warrants illegally to spy on President Trump and his cabinet. You can't make this stuff up, folks. We'll be back right after the break. For Vincent Finelli, and this is the last segment. And boy, I have so much more information to tell you folks, but it's just not going to happen. I want to thank everybody for listening. And I'm going to keep going on with my list, which is basically proving that when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job or keeping a job based on what group you're in, this is metastasized through political correctness, divide and conquer strategies by the elite in order to destroy America, destroy the middle class, and destroy the ability for everybody to control their own destiny. So what I'm asking people to do, and I'm going to go back to my my examples here, is I mentioned this earlier in the show. Please, silent majority. We need to read up, research up, speak up, and vote up. It's a lot less left-right paradigm than it is the aristocracy controlling the serfs. Keep in mind, there are some people, too, on the right, Republicans, that are called neocons and rhinos. And basically, they're traitors. They're traitors against the little people. Because when you sell out, when you're bought and paid for, you're basically selling out the little guy. Whether it be information, through distractions, through breads and circuses, doesn't matter. You're eliminating opportunity, dreams, goals, and the ability to pursue one's happiness. So, my next on the list is men going into female bathrooms and locker rooms, as long as a grown man identifies as a little girl. There's an article here. I'm going to read a comment by JP regarding what Charlize Theron, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing her name. She looks like an actress. She might be the actress who is on the Italian Job. Anyway, Trump administration violating transgender people's basic human rights, she says. Well, I'm going to read what JP says as basically under the comment section. My daughter has a bigger right to go into the restroom or the shower in the gym without some mental patient that thinks they are a female joining her. Trans mentals can use this bathroom. They are biologically born to. If they don't like that, they can wait to go to the bathroom and shower when they get home. President Trump is enforcing basic rights. The right to go to the bathroom. God made you, and he made a man and a woman. Nowhere did he create transvestites. Trump making America great again and bringing sanity back, unquote. I just thought I would read that because we're getting into a point where things have just gotten stupid with social indoctrination. I mean, look at college. Clemson University, expecting certain people to be on time is racist. University of California, they have chill zones and mats and beanbag chairs for naps. University of Michigan, Trump derangement syndrome, enlist services of psychologists in a room full of Play-Doh and bubbles. You can't make this crap up. University of Arkansas, eliminating C grades and start grades at the B- level. Nope, we're not reducing the bars of standards and expectations there. Several universities around the country are saying the American flag is a symbol of hate. Even though combat deaths, 99% were male. Work mortality, 94% male. Homicides, 76% male. Suicide, 75% male. All these people who fought for our freedoms and liberties, for our Bill of Rights and Constitution, and we just want to kick them off to the curb. How about here's a good one. College students intimidated by masculine wood paneling. We have really dialed it into stupid. Oh, if that insults anybody, just remember that Zuckerberg calls all of you on Facebook effing dummies and useful idiots. America and the Western world, I want to thank you for listening. I'm always humbled to be on the show and basically have my right of free speech in America. Thank you all, and have a great day.